Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know for some of you, you've never done anything like this before. So thank you for trusting us and for showing up. If you're like Karen and I, there have been times where something is holding you back from moving forward with what you really want to do in this life. And sometimes you know what that thing is, and other times you have no idea. Usually the things are beliefs that we don't even know we have about ourselves. These beliefs usually stem from our childhood and they get trapped in our bodies. These beliefs become energy. You can't see them, but they exist and they're stuck in us. What's so exciting is that you can get rid of these beliefs. And that is what brings us to Lizzi. Hi, Lizzi.
Hi, Lizzi. Oh, Lizzi Cutler is one of our favorite modern mystics and healing practitioners. She's joining us for a series of sessions where we're going to help you move that stuck energy out so that you can live a more joyful and fulfilling life. For those of you who may be a little like, I'm not so sure what you're talking about, don't worry. Lizzi's going to explain. You're also going to love the way she takes the woo-woo out of her energy and intuitive work. She's created a life-changing technique to help you get unstuck that she calls editing. Both Robyn and I have experienced this work with Lizzi, and we can tell you that it works, which is why we want to share this with you. And we're all going to do it live together today. Lizzi has identified the most common fears that hold us back. And each month during these Seeking Center life experiences, we're going to focus on a different fear and get it out of our systems. Each one of us here is in our uniqueness. And yet over time, we let the world cover up our awesomeness. That's not going to happen anymore. Today, we're going to free ourselves from what other people think, that fear of judgment, and release that so we can be our truest, most incredible selves.
Before Lizzi gets started, we want to encourage you to use chat to either respond to what we're doing or ask any questions. We'll be looking at that throughout the session. And also, as I said when we started, we're recording this. So for those who couldn't make it, hi. Or if you'd like to watch it again, it will be available later today. I'll be sending it out. So we're going to get going. Lizzi, let's start with what is an edit?
So first and foremost, thank you guys so much for having me, Robyn and Karen. This has been an unbelievable journey. And I'm really grateful to be here with all these people.
It's just getting going, by the way.
It's just getting going. This is step one. So an edit is, if you think about sort of upgrading your software, when you think about your iPhone tells you it's time for an upgrade, that's what we're doing with edits. So those of you that have been around children or been around babies, you can see how when a child feels happy, they laugh. When they're sad, they cry. When they're mad, they throw or they scream. Energy comes in, energy moves out. It's expressed really easily. So imagine that as like an open funnel. And then once we're the age of like 3 or 4 until 7, 8, 9, between those ages, we don't have a great way of discerning fact from fiction from the adults around us. All we know is that the adults are our lifeline to survival. And most of what they say is fact, right? We don't know how to understand or read sarcasm or fears or limiting beliefs or any of that stuff. And so we take some of those things that we hear as fact, and they get clouded in that funnel like chunks of gravel. So things like the fear of being judged, or the fear of being manipulated, or the fear of being ignored. We start programming those fears in as true threats to our survival. And they get stored like those chunks of gravel. So as we try to express something, it gets stuck in that funnel. And so what we're going to do through these edits is move that chunk out, pull that piece of gravel out, so that it's not so much that triggers don't ever trigger again, but the recovery process is so much faster. So all of a sudden, our subconscious or our little kid brain and our little kid way of thinking is now in better alignment with our adult rational thinking brain. And so we can come back into alignment. So for most of us intellectually, we know we shouldn't care what other people think. We shouldn't let it impact our life. We shouldn't play small because of what other people think. And yet, when we go to really like put ourselves out there and be vulnerable and be big and create impact, there's a huge piece of us that says, what in the world are you doing? Just stop and think about that for a second. And we get small and we hold back. That's our subconscious mind telling us to do that out of alignment from our conscious thinking mind. So by doing these edits, it's about really understanding and getting clear on what is your little kid self telling you? How did that serve you? And where do you need to go in the future in order to feel that alignment and that flow? Throw in the chat for me if you recognize and understand the feeling of what I mean between flow versus stuckness. And if there's something specific that you're feeling stuck around, like if you can actually pinpoint it and speak it, that would be even cooler if you're willing to share it. No pressure, but let's also just sort of say this is a safe room and a safe space, and there is no judgment allowed in the room. By the way, I guarantee anything that you're going to say, at least a few of us are in there with you.
Yeah. Yes.
Totally.
And actually, I love what you said about being a safe space. Actually, just bringing it to the fact that I was at the Lizzo concert the other night, and she actually starts out the show talking about that this is a safe space.
Wow, at a concert.
Yes. So I'm just saying, it's all safe space.
You know, me and Lizzo.
You and Lizzo.
Lizzo.
That's
Same,
right.
same.
Lizzie, Lizzo. It's all the same. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we all get the difference between being in flow and sort of being in alignment versus being stuck and having that craving, like there's something else. Yeah, totally, like public speaking, where intellectually, like you should be able to get up and speak. What's the worst that's going to happen? And when you go to do it, your body actually stops you. Having the same desires year after year without making any progress. That's exactly what I'm talking about. There's that desire, that itch, that craving, that thing on the tip of your tongue, and everything else in you is like, but I don't know where to start. So that's the stuckness, and that's that thing that we're going to shift today.
And Noelle brought up time moves slowly versus fast.
Yeah. So when it comes to time, we could really go on a tangent here, and this could be its own episode in itself. Yeah. When we think about time, again, it's our rational thinking brain of this is how I want things to go. And this is the way my conscious brain thinks that things should be going, versus the ease and allowing and sort of focusing more on getting in alignment for the sake of feeling good versus getting in alignment for the sake of business thriving, meeting the man of my dreams, right? Like the outcome being the goal versus feeling good being the goal. And when we think about the fear of being judged, so much of it is about what we think we're supposed to be doing in order to have the story to tell at the party or have the thing to say when someone says, so what's new with you? Right? We want to be able to say like, business is thriving and I just did 2 weeks in Italy and I'm going here and this is happening. And if we don't have it fast enough, it sort of feels like I'm not hitting the markers I should be hitting. Therefore, people are going to think I'm failing. Right? And what are the markers of success?
A lot of it too is always it's the comparison, right? When you're getting into a situation, it's like, how am I being compared to other people? And the other thing I was just speaking up on too is the energy. Like Robyn and I talk all the time about how when you're in a room of people, you can literally feel their energy. And so if you're not energy aligned, if your energy is not aligned with those people, then you feel even more out of sync with the people in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there other ways that you feel like these fears in general and this fear of being judged show up in terms of how someone's acting?
So when you think about how things are showing up in your life, most of us, and I'm going to talk about like sort of mainstream, right? And this is where I don't love getting into the woo-woo, but the actual practical part of being in life, these fears show up when it comes to our financial stability and success. So our judgment on kind of where we are in the money game, where we are in relationships, right? So how my partnerships, my work relationships, family relationships, am I being judged by these people? And who means the most to me? And like, what is their judgment? How does it weigh? And then also kind of thinking about on ourselves. So many of us have body image judgments or judgment on our weight. How much are we working out? What should I be doing? It's all of the shoulds that are coming from the external. And we imagine it all to be external. And people ask me all the time, so what do I do about energy vampires or like people that suck the life out of me? And the first thing that I want to talk about with that, it's coming from within, right? Like the call is coming from inside the house here. Because if it's not landing with you, if someone says to me, you're so blonde, it's like trashy how blonde your hair is, that's going to roll right off my back, right? But if someone says to me, wow, your business, like that's where your business is with the face and the tone and the whole thing. Like if I have any insecurity around my business success, that's going to hit right at the core of me. And that's how I know it's my issue that they're just bringing up for me. And so whenever we go into the fear of judgment, if it's about where are you vacationing, what kind of house are you in? Am I embarrassed if people come over where I have to like clean suddenly or make my house look like something it's not? Or if carrying a certain handbag makes me feel a certain way, that's where I need to start paying attention to what am I telling myself someone else's opinion means about my value? Because anytime we're trying to shift a piece of what's authentic to us, it's our inner child saying who you are at your core is not okay. So elevate in this certain way. Like before my mom comes to my house, I'm in my head thinking, what is she going to criticize? And what can I fix before she walks in the door so I don't have to deal? Right? Or before like my accountant gets into my books, I'm trying to like pull it all together to make it look like I've been doing my bookkeeping for that whole time and not scrambling at the end. So what is the thing that you're editing in yourself that you present to the outside world that you're afraid of someone judging you once they get in? And for most of us, this comes up when we think of really being exposed, really being vulnerable, like the naked truth of who you are. Mentally, physically, spiritually, right? With all of us, when we're either dating someone new or in a partnership, the idea of being physically naked, we all sort of freak out for a second of like, oh God, what if they see that there's cellulite when I clench my butt? Like, what is going to happen, right? They might think I'm cute with all my makeup on and my hair done, but like,
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
and that's the physical side of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Any questions so far before we keep going?
Yes, let's get some questions if there's any that anyone has right now. But I also want to bring up when you talk about that inner child and that I don't know that everybody has taken the time to really picture themselves as that 3 or 4-year-old, 5-year-old self.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know for me, when I started doing that a few years ago, it had been a really long time since I really thought of myself as that little Robyn. And so I think it's important as we do this work for everyone to take a moment and really remember that little person that you were.
That's actually a great point. So do us a favor, close your eyes. And this is very impromptu, by the way. Just close your eyes. And for most of us, it's easiest to imagine a photograph. So either come up with a memory or a photograph of when you were anywhere between like 5 and 7. So think like kindergarten, first grade-ish. And if you can feel into the vulnerability of not understanding how the world works and not really knowing what to expect in a lot of different scenarios that we're put into. And just notice the frequency or the vibration, like if you had to draw the radio frequency of it, the vibration of feeling afraid of being judged. And notice kind of what you look like, notice the haircut you have, notice the clothes you were wearing. For some of you, there might be some smells that you can connect to of like your classroom or your parents' car or the house. And just hold that image of your little inner child and gently blink open your eyes. So that's the person we're talking to today. That's the person that was so brilliant at looking around the world and really quickly assessing, this is what's safe, this is what's not. This is what I need to remember for next time. This is what feels okay. And that's what we're working in today.
I love
Does that
that.
make sense?
Yeah,
That's really
helps
good.
so much.
Okay.
And when we talk about this, Lizzie, when Robyn and I had our sessions with you, you talked a lot about the double bind. Can you explain that? Because that was something that tripped me up and I wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah, this is a juicy one. So when you think about like from physics, if you're pushing on both sides of a door, let's say with equal and opposite force, the door doesn't move. So that stuckness that we feel, it shows up in judgment in relationship to the fear of constantly living under the judgment of others. So constantly sort of editing yourself to fit this mold, the fear of staying small, of staying stuck, of staying sort of stifled from who you actually are is pushing really hard on one side of the door, because the fear of being exposed and being wrong or being judged for it or ridiculed or shamed is so intense, especially for that 5 or 6 year old, like in kindergarten, that we're slamming that door shut. And with equal and opposite force, we're on the other end of it as our adult self, shoving it open in the sense of, I can't wrap this lifetime up without leaning into that thing and feeling that and expressing it and tasting it and touching it and living it. And the force from both sides is the stuckness. And the stuckness is there to get uncomfortable enough that we do something about it. And that's why you're here. You're here because the idea of being judged and living under judgment feels so uncomfortable and cringy and nails on a chalkboard that your soul is saying to you, please pay attention. And the only way that our soul has to get our attention is through our physical body and our emotions. So that frustration of the stuckness or the pain in your hip or your low back or any kind of stuckness in your body is usually an inability to step forward. So that's the double bind that we're going to talk about. And this double bind thing is applicable to every area of your life. It's financial stability, it's relationship stability and growth and expansion, it's self-preservation. All of it is all about the fear of really stepping out into the light and being willing to kind of weather the potential ridicule and the fear or the fear of not doing it. And it's that equal force.
Yeah, because it keeps you.
Yeah, and I don't think people think of it that way. They just
No. And the other thing that I think we should mention too is that whole idea of the self-judgment creeping in as well. Like, I know we're always like rehearsing that as well. Like, what are people going to think? But then once that gets into your own head, you end up repeating it over and over and over, that self-judgment talk. Right. And then that can keep you just as stuck.
So this is going to kind of lead us right into the actual edit that we're going to do. When you think about being in kindergarten or first grade, 99.9% of people that I work with have a memory of throwing something out there, whether it's what do you guys want to play today, or being asked a question at school, or anything sort of in our childhood memories of instantly answering a question and everyone turning around and laughing, having some moment where it feels like you just got caught with your pants down in second grade or first grade and feeling like, oh shit, how did I not know? That feeling of like blood rushing up to your head, your stomach sinks down, you're sweating in the back of your neck. And that feeling of, how did I not know that? How did I not know to not say that? Everybody else here knew that that was something that was funny or not right. And I didn't know. And that's exactly when we get programmed with, don't trust your inner self. Think before you speak and like pull back a little bit. Don't just raise your hand and shout it out, because you need to assess the situation. Because what's happening is, for little people, like the cave beings in us, if you're ostracized and you're alone and you're not a part of the pack, you're more likely to be killed or die, right? You're not in the pack to stay warm. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have safety and stability from the elements. So our natural animal instinct brain says, be a part of the crew. And if I'm the one person that's apart from the crew, as a little person, it feels as close to death. It's like touching the hot stove and having your hand burned. Like, I'm never going to touch the hot stove again. And when I hear that thing light, I'm going to know to recoil. So it's brilliant. And as little people, when it's social like that, we don't really have a ton of tools other than don't screw that up again. And so we start playing small. We start getting into that shell. And that's exactly when it starts happening. So that's how these things get programmed and stored. That's the fear of being judged. And it's brilliant, right? It's a good thing and it helps us. The problem is we're so little at that stage. And yes, Janet, do these memories get buried? 100%. They get buried, but more importantly, they become just a natural part of our cycle of how our psyche works, because they're so applicable and they're so handy. And then once we're like teens and young adults and out of college and in the real world, they've been running in the background for so long that we don't have an adult critical thinking mind to sort of pick and choose what we want to still be running. So the 6-year-old is still running the show. And that fear and that coping mechanism from when we were 6 is still being used at 36 and 46 and 56, even though intellectually we know something different. And that brings us back to the double bind.
Ugh.
Crazy, right?
It is.
Is this resonating with you guys? You don't have to know what the fear is. You don't have to get into any of that. But like, are light bulbs clicking in here? Sophie, amazing. Yes. Great.
Yeah, and I don't think again, until you make the time like everyone here today is doing, you don't even know that this is a thing, or you don't take the time to actually think about it. You really have no idea the impact of those years and what it's doing to you as an adult.
So I'm also going to give you a quick get out of jail free card here. It's nearly impossible to see from the inside. Because again, you've never known life without it there. So it's like me saying to you, like, I know you've been thinking that the sky is blue and that's blue, but we've all been calling that green and expecting to suddenly have your brain assess that as green. It's not going to happen. It's been in that funnel since you had a thinking brain, since you could have that like critical thinking mind, right? So it's okay. That's what I want to say first and foremost. And like Robyn and Karen, we've talked about this so much. These things aren't like a bad thing of like, oh shit, I'm doing this. Well, now what? It's like, no, this is exactly. So Laura just said, I can hardly remember an age when I didn't have those fears,
right?
Because you can't remember before then, right? Most of us don't have memories before 4 years old. So they've been there for as long as you can remember. And so it's going to take a minute, but just by being aware, they start to shift. And so that's what an edit is. That's what we're doing in an energy edit. We're recognizing it. It's like, I'm going to show you how to dig into the crevices of what is in those memories. Like I always picture the big filing cabinet and like scrolling to the back of it. Like what's happening back there?
It's so what it is.
And just by seeing it and realizing it, now your adult critical thinking brain, your conscious mind, your inner being can see like, oh, you sweet thing. Mm-hmm. You've been thinking that for so long. Yes, that totally happened in kindergarten. It was a great tool to use when you were that age. And now when you see it come up, you'll be able to say, sweet girl, we have more tools now. We can let it go. And that's how the recovery starts happening faster.
Yes.
Love this. So should we try one?
I think it's a good segue. Let's do it.
Yeah. If we could just, before we go into the actual edit, if you could throw in the chat, what is sort of your number one, like fear of being judged for what? Is it not having enough money? Is it not having the right body, not having the right relationship, not having the right business? What is it that you're telling yourself? Like, what's the hardest thing for you to sort of expose? And you don't have to give it too much thought, but just sort of like,
I'll just say like, I think one of mine has just been fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
Mine has always been being smart enough, like having the right thing to say, being smart enough compared to the other people in the room.
Yeah.
Great.
So for most of us, it's not blank enough.
Not talented enough.
Not talented enough, not living up to my potential. Mm-hmm. So Wendy, if you go a little bit deeper than that, I wonder if there's a like not working hard enough, right? We're always told no pain, no gain, all of that bullshit.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And Sanjay, most of this is subconscious. Most of it happens so quickly and it's so on the sly. And we're so used to overcompensating or hiding from it that like, it's just shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So you guys are going to sit back and chill, but I want you to take your dominant hand. So I'm a righty, and this is where I get into the woo-woo. So you're just going to jump into the woo with me. You're going to take your dominant hand and you're going to place it right at your solar plexus. So my rib cage kind of splits here, and I'm putting my hand right over there. Yes, fear of being seen as a fraud, good old imposter syndrome. Okay, now lean back in your chair, get comfortable. You're going to lean back, close your eyes. And this is the opposite of meditation. So we're just going to do this one edit, and you're going to let your head spin out into all of the thoughts. So this isn't about clearing your head. This is about going down all the different rabbit holes. And I want you to go into the fear of being judged. And when you think about the vibration, the frequency of feeling judged, the fear of being judged, imagine you're walking into a black tie party wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. The fear of being judged. Notice that feeling, that frequency. Maybe it's being asked a question at work and having absolutely no idea how to answer it. And you're going to start in your current situation. So kind of start at the present. Fear of being judged. And as you connect to that vibration, just notice memories from your life pop up that match it. Fear of being judged. Just ask to see all the different memories. Stay in there, trace it back. Maybe go back to your 20s. Feel into the fear of being judged. Notice different professional situations, personal life, romantic relationships. Stay in it. Go back even more. Go back to high school. Notice where you feel it in your body. Fear of being judged. Now take it all the way back to junior high, to grade school. Notice what you heard in school. Notice what you saw at home. What were the adults around you saying? Take it back to elementary school. Notice what you saw. Notice how you saw adults interacting and acting around you. Fear of being judged. Notice how it felt. And staying in it, just ask to see or to be shown the origin point. If it's helpful, if it's going to help you, just ask that you can see it really clearly. And still staying in it, set the intention to be willing to let it go. Set the intention to let it shake off of you. Perfect. And take a deep breath in and let all of that go. And gently blink open your eyes. Karen and Robyn, I'm going to ask you guys to be vulnerable and actually share with us what came up in there. The rest of you, if you'd like to throw in the chat what came up, and everybody grab a big sip of water.
I'll do that first.
Yeah.
It's so emotional, and I don't know how everyone else felt, but I just immediately, I just start tearing when I think about, especially when I go back further and further. I mean, it starts and I can see it coming up in my more adult, and then going back into my 20s, and then those teen years, man, brutal.
Yeah. By the way, just
Yeah.
quickly, tears flowing or yawns coming up, you're muted. You're welcome to let it flow. Let it out. Let that all move out.
Yeah, definitely. Crying for my little self. Yeah, I totally am. And I know for me, the most vivid from my childhood years really was when I was 9, and I had moved from Brooklyn, New York to Highland Park, Illinois, which is where I am now. And it was 4th grade. I came in the middle of 4th grade. And in my school in New York, everybody wore dresses and got dressed up for school, even though it was public school. That was just, or it was my mom. I have no idea, but she made us wear dresses. And when I showed up for my first day of school at Lincoln School in Highland Park, I walked in this purple dress. I was so nervous. And everybody was wearing jeans or shorts and t-shirts. There was not one skirt, one dress. And I was so embarrassed so that when it was lunchtime and my mom was picking us up for lunch that day to see how things were going, I made her go to Kmart, because that's the only place we knew, because we still didn't live in our house yet, to buy me shorts and a t-shirt. And I just remember feeling so completely out of it, not fitting in. It was the worst. Now, listen, it all ended up wonderful. And obviously I live in Highland Park now, but that was brutal and really has stayed with me.
Yeah. Thank you for being willing to share that. Yeah. So that
it's
fear, it's it's the hot stove, right? It's that sucked. And that idea of everybody's eyes turning to you as the new kid is such a threat as a little person that it feels like no matter what I have to do, I need to avoid standing out this much.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at Maria has said something very similar.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You go out there so innocent. And then I think for me, similarly, but it's the idea of being singled out. So for me, it was when I was in, I think it was 2nd grade, and there was a kid, believe it or not, even at that age, who was like a bully, who was teasing me about just being, who did I think I was, that I was coming across with this air of I was better than everybody else. I think he had a crush on me now that I look back on it, but he was and he called me Carrot. He's like, hey, Carrot, and instead of my name. And so every time I was walking by him, and then of course everybody chimed in and started laughing. And I think I went back to my high school when I was a freshman, and I was coming in from Catholic school. And again, I was singled out by one of the girls, and I was bullied. And it was always that fear of them judging me for thinking I was something other than I wasn't. And so I think I always tend to pull back on shining too bright or showing myself too big, so that I wouldn't be vulnerable enough to be judged in that way.
So for the sake of having, I'm going to kind of get like fast forward to the meat of all of this. Underneath all of these, it's the feeling of being unsafe.
Yes.
Right? Like, I mean, Janet, I got my period in 7th grade social studies. Is there anything more horrifying?
No.
Right? Maybe pooping your pants as a kid, right? But like, it's terrifying. And it feels, again, it goes back to that like lizard reptile brain of feeling like we're going to be alone, which equals death, right? It is literally, it feels like it's life-threatening. And I have a niece and a nephew now who are 7 and 10. And so I'm like watching it in real time. Their thing of like, Mom, don't say anything. Or like, you know, I see them with my sister and she's over it. And I'm like, wait. Remember how that felt, right? You don't want to be the kid that's standing out because it feels like, I lived in Tokyo and there was a saying of like, the nail that sticks out highest gets pounded down. It's like, you don't want to be the one that stands out. It feels like it's threatening to your existence. Mm-hmm. So this is where we want to start paying attention. And if there's anybody else that wants to chime in, please feel free to share. And part of this is about, you're going to start recognizing over the next few weeks. So like normally in a session, we would do like, 10 of these and kind of cruise through. But for the sake of actually really breaking it down, I want you to spend the next few weeks paying attention to just being aware of when you dial it back, when you have an instinct to sort of step out or step into the light, or to Karen's point, like really speak the thing, and then just take a half a step back out of safety. And we're not saying from the get-go, don't take the step back and just throw it all out there. The first step is just in being aware of it. And then slowly testing the water. So slowly testing, like, what if I did say the thing that I want to say right now? Because intellectually, if a conference room full of people turns and says, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, your heart might sink and you might blush, and then you're going to recover and keep it moving because you're an adult. But your inner child, your subconscious mind doesn't know that. It doesn't know that you have the ability to recover. So it's about slowly practicing the recovery of, oh shit, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I'm actually fine. And then the next time it doesn't hiccup so much. And that's how we sort of start creating this flow and this ease. Because in an ideal, perfect scenario, you're in alignment and you're in that flow. And so as ideas pop in, kind of from universe or from source or from your soul, you take that impulse and you run with it, and then everything else falls into place. But it's like our soul keeps trying to give us these nuggets of going from A, jumping over to Z. And our inner child is saying, no, I got to go to B to C to D to E. And so these amazing leaps forward show up, and we pull back and take the hard road because we're afraid taking the shortcut is going to end in complete annihilation. Does that make sense? If you could just like nod or throw in the chat any questions.
Well, and I think to your point, and there's a subtlety to all of it over the next few weeks. I think that's what I think everybody on here should know. After doing this with Lizzi many times now, what I've noticed is, because it is that recognition of A to B to C to D, it's these, you'll notice in the little moments, and then it all ends up adding up to getting you to Z. And then what opens up for you, it's like, then it's just complete flow. So things just won't impact you the way they used to, because it's it's the time, you're giving it the time. It's not an overnight thing.
Right. I think that when you think of the word edit at first, you think automatically like it's just pull it out, it's done. Right. But it really is in that catching yourself and tracing it back to where that emotion is really coming from, and doing that over and over. And that's the hard part, is the catching yourself and recognizing.
So what I would love for you guys to pay attention to, and feel free to email us and let us know like what's coming up for you, is to just notice, oh, I wanted to say this thing and I chose not to because the fear came up and I actively chose not to. versus it just happened subconsciously. I didn't even realize I was doing it. That to me is a win, right? Because you are now an active creator in your life of like, I know this fear just came up and I'm letting the fear win, but I'm seeing it eyes wide open versus something just happened to me and I froze, right? Because that's what's normally happening to us. It's all happening with our eyes closed and we're just sort of fumbling through. So once you see it, you'll have opportunities. Like I'll let my house be dusty when my mom comes over and play a game with myself of, okay, is it an over under of 10 minutes of when she comments? And then I'm laughing at it instead of triggering at her whole thing of like, you're not doing enough. You're not being good enough, which I know intellectually is not her intention and blah, blah, blah. But the more you can pay attention to, oh, my little girl is having this battle in her head. And I'm just going to sort of play into that versus I'm going to edit myself and scramble to make sure she can't hurt me. And then have the fake conversation for 3 weeks after that. Lizzie, did you just go into our energy to help clear that fear we just went over? Yes and no. So when I'm working on a group, I'm holding space, I'm creating the container, and you are going in and clearing it, which is what makes energy editing so impactful. Is that, so I work with people in 2 different ways. I do energy clearings and energy edits. And when I do a clearing, I have you just lay back and I just do everything that I can for you. And I haven't found that they're as impactful as when we do this kind of work where I'm showing you how to do it. So there's an element to this type of work in the edits where I'm helping you clear it, but you are the one doing the work and I'm showing you how and holding the container for you to do it.
I mean, I don't
Lizzie,
know. Oh, you go.
I was just going to ask, is there any advantage to, if you recognize that moment in that little self, like I did with that kid calling me carrot when I was, is there any advantage to going back to that moment and trying to replay it in a different way in your mind? Can that help heal that experience?
I think some people would probably say yes. To me, the most important part is recognizing how it's impacting you now. Right? Like I've done like those cool sessions with past life regression and all that stuff. You know, with all due respect, I didn't notice that it did all that much for me, but it was cool and it was interesting. And I love all of that. To me, it's more about noticing now when my actions now are being impacted as if I'm still in that.
Gotcha.
Right. So just by pulling this out and highlighting it and seeing it with a rational thinking adult brain, for me moving forward, that changes it. So when I trigger and I want to clean my condo before my mom comes over, I feel that because I'm so used to being in flow now. I've done so many of these edits. I'm used to feeling really good that when I start feeling bad and I start feeling the fear of being judged, it's so uncomfortable for me to feel that trigger that I'm unwilling to sit in it. And so I instantly notice something is up. My inner child is telling me something. My subconscious mind is telling me something that I know is not true because I don't feel good anymore. And so what am I telling myself? I'm telling myself that I'm going to get pummeled with this messaging of you're not good enough. And is that a fact? Right? And like, there's no way that that's a fact. So then I can start shifting out of it. And that to me is the most empowering, is when I can see it, ask the question, is this a fact? Am I actually not smart enough in this meeting? Maybe it is, right? Like, but you're then assessing it from an adult mind instead of a 4-year-old mind. So that to me is like where the power comes in, where the empowerment comes in.
In the present. Yeah. Agree.
Yeah. And is it worth keeping track of these moments? Like, or where you're seeing in this case, that fear of being judged or what people are thinking, what can people do to really make sure that they are noticing?
So one of the things that I noticed was that these patterns come up of either it's at work or it's around money or it's around, right? Like it will keep coming up in a certain way and it's coming up, it's going to get annoying enough until you start paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of want to, like, I have a list in my phone of like moments I get prickly When do I feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up? When do I feel my stomach sink? And when do I get really insecure? What's my body doing when I get insecure? And then immediately go into like, what did someone just say to me? Because it's me, right? They're showing me where my insecurities are.
Mhm.
So if I can keep a list of that, you know, when I start a session in a one-on-one setting with a client, it's always like, when did you get pissed? What happened in the past few weeks that really made you upset, hurt, triggered? What fights were you having in the shower for 2 weeks after some conversation happened? Right? And that's always our clue of this is the thing to pay attention to. There are 99% of the time, there are themes and there are like trends that start happening. And that's where we know how to look.
Got it. Well, and I know you brought this up, but about your niece and nephew, but are there, for those who have children, how do we not screw our kids up? Or how do we start to pay attention to those moments? Are there questions we can ask, or do we just have to let it happen? Like, what do we do?
Yeah, it's a hard one. And I get asked this all the time. And first and foremost, it's about remembering like humans are here to work through our shit, right? We're here to work through our karma and get to the next level. And if you pay attention to how you're saying things, so if a kid isn't doing their homework and isn't studying, instead of saying, if you don't work hard, you're not going to get anywhere. That's not a fact. That is not a true statement across the board in our universe, right? So being really mindful of the way you're phrasing things and noticing everything that you say, you don't know what's going to get programmed as a piece of gravel in that funnel. We have no idea. And it could be something from TV or a friend's house. It's not all on the parents, but being mindful to sort of say the way that we phrase things as a suggestion versus a fact of the world will help. And kind of paying attention to when you see a kid go into that shame or go into that judgment or that insecurity, and then having that conversation, right? Being willing to sort of share and be in the moment of, hey, I have felt insecure too. And this is what it feels like in my body. And this is what I'm telling myself, but this is what a fact is. And this is what a feeling is. And this is how we know the difference. And one of my clients had twin girls, and she used to say to her girls, if you took a telescope inside your body, is it a heart discomfort or is it a body discomfort? Which I thought was so cool to teach them, like, is this a feeling that you're having or does your stomach hurt?
Yes.
Right? Like, is this
That's
anxiety?
helpful for adults too.
100%.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Because so
But
many
also, you know, first and foremost, kind of recognizing these are good things that they're coming up and that you're feeling things. So it's not, you know, you're not screwing anybody up.
Yes. Well, and there are ways as an adult to get rid of them.
Exactly.
Which is why we're all here.
Yeah.
Are there any questions that people have from this before? I'm just being mindful of time. I know we have about 8 minutes left-ish. And Lizzi, is there anything else that you want to say about this particular exercise in judgment?
Yes. So first and foremost, we only did one edit, so you're totally fine. But if you have a headache today or you're super thirsty, it's really normal that when we do energy work to feel dehydrated. And I can't explain it scientifically yet, but just trust me, drink a ton of water. Please feel free to email me as you notice thoughts come up. And it's also really common for things to keep coming up over the next few days. So just because you're not feeling different tomorrow, the way I describe this work is it's like turning a cruise ship, not like a quick Atkins diet of a situation. So just try to be mindful and try to watch it and pay attention to what's coming up and when, and use the trigger as a tool of knowing where to look. Because it's always, always, always about some belief that you have about you. 10 out of 10 times. And you're all welcome to email me and kind of say like, my mother's driving me insane, or my boss triggers me so bad it's hard to go to work on Mondays. What's coming up? Because it's just about digging deep enough to figure out what it is that you are telling yourself about what you think they're judging you for.
Yeah, one of the great examples that you gave when we had you on the podcast was about the work the job, right? And just want your boss drives you crazy, but you can't quit your job.
Yeah.
So this is such a great tool. If you're going in there and something is continually triggering you over and over and over, you don't have to necessarily quit, but you can alleviate the situation just by practicing some of these.
Yeah.
Well, and same with like a partner that you constantly are fighting with. We're not saying you need to leave them today, maybe eventually, who knows, but this type of practice is going to help on the daily.
Yeah. So my intention is never, and really the way that I started working with people was like lawyers would call me and say, I have a mortgage and nannies and private school and things to pay for. I have like the thickest golden handcuffs of golden handcuffs. I can't quit, but I can't breathe on Sundays. And so if you can't change the stressor, you can't change the work or the way people are speaking to you, it's not about them. It's about you changing what you're telling yourself about it. And then that changes everything. Because also once you change your vibration around it, the pattern doesn't need to keep coming up. The universe is showing you what you believe. And so the trigger is just showing you where you are. It's the gift of it. And like, I've wanted to slap people when they say like, thank the trigger, it's your gift. Like, no, I hate that. And
How about punch it? Yeah.
Right? Like a little bit, it is, it's showing you where you are and it's showing you where your work is. So like follow it down the rabbit hole of what am I actually telling myself? And is it a fact? That is the number one piece of advice that I give people of how to work on yourself from within. What am I telling myself? Is it a fact? So you have to first recognize that I'm triggered. Like anytime you sit there after a conversation thinking of what I could have said, right? When you go back into the like, why didn't I say this? Or why didn't I tell that? If you immediately go into what am I telling myself they were saying to me? And is it a fact?
Oof, those are
Like
good.
if we could just do that, I just put it in the chat because I think that's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Head yourself.
And today, and I think really in the exercise we did today for everyone, having an understanding of that whole thread from where you are now back through time in this lifetime to when you were a little person, understanding that and then seeing that root of it or close to the root is so helpful and understand and getting how programmed that is inside yourself.
Yeah.
But we just, today we just rattled it.
We just shook that baby up.
We did. We did.
Oh,
So-
thanks, Alice. I'm glad this was helpful for you.
Does anyone have any questions or did anything interesting or weird come up for you?
Deep stuff.
Yeah.
It's deep.
Yeah.
It is.
It's juicy. It's good.
It is. And I have to imagine a lot of people on here today haven't done that. They haven't gotten that far back yet.
Sophie has a great question. What do you do in the moment if you feel very triggered? Do you ever get up and leave the conversation? 100%, 1000%. I would say like 20% of the time I can do this in the moment. But the reality is for most of us, for 43 years, I've been practicing coming up with a witty defense and pushing back and barking back. So it takes a minute for this stuff to settle in. I will say the more of this work that I've done, the more I can hold myself and sort of say like, wow, what I'm telling myself you just said is this, and I don't buy it. But I think getting up and leaving the conversation and working on yourself on your own is a much healthier and more productive version than sparring, right? It's fun to watch on Real Housewives. I don't really want to be involved in it in my own life. So yes, getting up, leaving the conversation, and then genuinely asking yourself, where did I just feel that in my body? What was the comment? And what am I telling myself they meant by the comment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's huge. If you can start doing that, I think that's, then we've been very productive today.
Yeah. And your body usually tells you before we can acknowledge what our emotions are telling us. So for me, it's like the stomach ache hits before anything.
Yeah. Or I love that what you said before about being in that shower and you're just rehearsing it. That's
yeah. And then I would say, oh no. And then I would say this. There's a great meme that says like that woman who looked at me funny in the grocery store, we're really duking it out and I almost have her up against the ropes.
Well, that's why I went back to my like younger self when that boy was teasing me.
Well, and I just want to,
Yeah.
one more thing before we go. Laura was just saying that she remembered feeling judged as a young child about what she was wearing, but she really can't necessarily get behind the why. What would you say to that?
So if you keep asking questions there, Laura, of the why, like, what did you feel? What were you telling yourself about in that moment? Like, if you go into, I felt judged for what I was wearing because, and answer that question, and then ask it again. So maybe it's because I wasn't wearing the right thing, or I felt like I was being pointed out and everybody was staring at me and laughing at me. And if they're staring at laughing at me, then I'm being highlighted and I'm shown as being different. And if I'm different, then no one will want to be my friend. Then people are going to laugh at me and judge me. And if they're laughing at me and judging me, then I won't have anyone to sit with at the lunch table, and no one will play with me at recess, and I'll be alone. And if I'm alone, then, and again, for most of us, the idea of being alone at that age means death. It means like everyone's in a pack. I'm out in the cold, and I'm going to be the one that doesn't have any food, shelter, anything, survival, right? As little kids on the playground, that feels like I'm done for. I'm cooked.
Thank you. And I know it's time. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank Lizzi. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
this guidance and wisdom with us and taking us through this exercise to help us all. And
Absolutely,
do you
my
want to talk
pleasure.
about what you're doing just in the next few days?
Yes. So we're about to launch a 3-day kind of intensive where I'm going to do, each day is going to be 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 60 minutes of this type of info with the actual work. So we're going to do a full round of energy edits. We're going to do a full energy clearing. It's going to be June 5th, 6th, and 7th. And if you want to go on my website and just make sure that your name is in, I haven't sent out the invite for it yet. We haven't launched it yet, but it's going to be out there in the next day or so. And just make sure that you're on my mailing list. Happy to have you in there. And that's a great way to just sort of gain access to sort of doing a full round of this, or book a session and let's jam.
Yeah, and that's at lizzicutler.com, and that's Lizzi. And then I also want to say we're going to do this again in a month. So same time on a Friday, but on Friday, June 16th, it'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be freeing ourselves from the fear of being manipulated. So freeing ourselves from being controlled, we're going to take our power back. So we'll have that sign up available next week, and we'll also be sending it out in our newsletter. And Karen and I will also be working with a former podcast guest, Alexa Fisher. She has something that she calls Wish Circle from her wishbeads.com. So we're doing that next Saturday. If anybody wants to join, you can go to wishbeads.com and look for Wish Circle and sign up, because Karen and I will be there, because it's a really powerful way to help make your wishes come true. And we just thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being here. I know this can be a little bit of a leap of faith. Thank you for playing and engaging and enjoying. It was really awesome to meet you. And I can't wait to see you next month.
It was so great to see so many people.
I know.
No, thank
From
you so
all
much
over.
for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you guys.
Bye. Bye.